Hello, everyone. Happy New Year from the team here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre. Today, I am joined by two of my great pals, the co-artistic producers of Cup of Hemlock Theatre, Ryan Barakovich and Mackenzie Horner. Happy New Year to you both. Hello, hello. How are you both?
Hello, hello.
Hello, Happy New Year.
Woohoo.
Good morrow, good lady.
And we thought we would start off the new year by looking back and recollecting on our experience at Stratford Festival 2023. We caught several of their shows last summer, and so we thought we would take the opportunity to do a bit of a roundup session today. So we have each selected 3 plays that were either our favorite or 3 plays that we really wanted to chat about that we got the opportunity to see. And similar to our other roundup episodes that you've possibly tuned into before, we're just going to rattle through at like 10-minute intervals and just offer up some of our thoughts of what we saw on Stratford's past season. And again, it's the top of 2024. So we look forward to announcements and future Stratford stuff coming down the line. For instance, Stratfest is releasing a selection of shows from last summer. Casey and Diana, Much Ado, and Richard II. Also, Casey and Diana will be getting another stage house at Soul Pepper, Cup coming. So Cup coming. Wow, I feel like I meant to say upcoming and I said Cup coming, and that's amazing. We that for a future thing. Great. So before we start diving into all of these fantastic productions, I'm going to toss it to you, Mackenzie. Hello. What is in your cup?
Well, Jill, as we are now finally doing our Stratford Roundup, it is, even though I've had this cup a few times now, it is my Richard II mug. All about, the death of kings telling sad stories, yada, yada, yada. But I decided to break it out because it was the perfect time for that. And I'm drinking a cup of Crystal Light as per the usual. And I gotta say, it's a great way to start the year by going back to our cup roots. Because all the way back when we started this venture, we started with our Stratford reviews with Comfiore's King Lear. And we also did Plumber's Tempest.
We did a lot of them.
Night. Did them all.
Nice.
We did them all. So it's great to kind of go back and revisit the festival because they always have some interesting things produced. And I mean, when this comes out, they'll be a month away from starting productions because people who don't know, Stratford runs basically, even though their shows start in April, usually April or May, they'll start previewing. They'll start rehearsals and everything in February with the cast and the creative teams, even though the productions have already been well underway between the seasons, getting things ready. But really, we're almost getting time for the 2024 season to get underway. So this is that perfect kind of time to do this right before we get a whole new batch of Stratford content getting sent our way. So yeah,
exactly.
There we go.
And I do love that you are sandwiched between Graham and Mev, our Much Ado couple, which we're going to chat about.
Beatrice and Benedict.
Indeed. Nice. Yes. And Ryan, how about yourself? What are you sipping on with us today?
Yes, I am sipping on coffee, and I have it in the cup, or with our Cup of Hemlock logo. Yeah, that's the show.
We still got it. Now. Still got the logo.
Still got it. One of these will have to merchandise those cups. I mean, I'm sure our listeners would love a cup.
Yeah, if there's demand for it, put it in the comments.
Comment below.
Let us know if you would like to buy a cup with our logo on it.
Yep.
That's hilarious. Great. Sipping some coffee. We love that. I am also sipping coffee for a nice segue there. And I'm using my aunt mug. I think I've used this on previous episodes before, but basically,
times. I've used it a few times too.
Yes, right. Ryan has. It's Other Ants, which is just like a nice, just like standard pony. And then you've got me, which is a magical unicorn on a pole dancing. And I thought it would be really neat to do, because you know how Stratford's 2023, one of their marketing promos was they would show an actor. So for example, like Emilio Vieira, and would show him in Grand Magic and then show his character in Richard II and then say the caption, it's called Range. So I feel like I can be this pony and I can be this unicorn. It's called Range, you know?
Yeah. And also, the pole dancing unicorn is very on brand with Richard II, I have to say.
Facts. Indeed. Nice. Yes. And I've got some water, because hydration station, as always.
Absolutely.
and Gatorade, because I've just been quite active recently. So we've got 3 beverages going.
You're in for the long haul. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a rehearsal hall. I have 3 beverages going. Okay, so let's dive right in, pals. So we're going to start with a production that all 3 of us got to see. Ryan and I saw it together, and Mac caught it on a different date. So that also might add some neat variances to our conversation. So this one we're going to jump into is Much Ado, directed by Chris Abraham. And Ryan, why don't you kind of kick us off? Oh, sorry, Mac. Mac, you kick us off with this one.
Sure. I can kick us off on this one. I mean, so I will say going into this, I was a bit of a Much Ado novice. I mean, I knew the basic premise of Much Ado, where, you know, it's kind of where that classic trope of, you know, they hate each other, but really they love each other came from, is this play. But I'd read it once years ago. I'd never seen it live, but it was one of those ones where I love both these lead actors, Mev Beatty and Graham Abbey. Seen them over the years. I will say Mev does a great job as a Ginger. I think that is a perfect hair color for her. She suits the fiery redhead personality well.
Not that you're biased or anything.
Yeah. But, you know, like, and it was fun because I saw this almost basically toward the end of the run. I think it was the last weekend before the closing weekend. I saw this, and I got to spend the morning with our wonderful friend of the show, Bridget Wilson. Her and I always meet up at least once a festival to walk the waterfront and have a nice gossip chat session. And she was talking to me about how they added stuff into this. They added 3, I think it's 2 or 3 monologues, at least 2. They've added 2 monologues in, or I think it's, or maybe you can correct me because maybe you know it better. But I know for sure they added the opening monologue that Beatrice talks about, where a hero's up in the rotating obelisk, kind of admiring herself, and she's talking about womanhood. Then there is one in the second act, or part 2, or after the intermission, where Beatrice is really upset, is kind of letting her anger out. And I thought maybe there was a third one toward the end with Hero's marriage. Yeah. So there were 3. So apparently that's been getting mixed reactions from people who have seen the show. But me being a Much Ado novice, I thought they worked great. I thought it actually gave really good dimension to the show and really put Beatrice front and center in this piece and gave her a really great driving presence throughout the show. So I thought that was really well done. And I forgot how little Don John is in this. Because he's talked about as one of the great villains of Shakespeare, but I'm like, he's done by the end of, like, you know, the first part. He's not really in the second act at all of this. So very interesting there. And he was played by
Michael Blake.
Thank you, Michael Blake. As well, I will say, I do want to give a special shout out to Glynis Rainey, who played one of the watchdog characters, because I have worked with her with Talk is Free Theater, and she is partnered with Mike Nemajowski, and they did a terrific production of Sunday in the Park that I saw, and so she was wonderful as playing this old kind of watchwoman who does bird calls. I was like, brilliant, Glynis, brilliant. And she'll be playing the nurse in this upcoming season's production of R&J with Amelia, who is playing Tybalt.
Right.
So there's a reason right there to go see that. But yes, overall, I thought the physical comedy was great. Like, once again, this is a very physical show. I mean, you have both leads literally climbing set pieces like trees and moving pots and tables, and like, it's a very physical show. They leaned into the comedy. And I will say this play and Richard II had the youngest audiences there, like very young audience. Like, I don't mean childlike, but like youthful audiences. Like, compared to what, you know, with Lear, Les Belles-Soeurs, other shows I saw that were more traditional plays, these 2 had the most youthful audiences around. And that was a really nice thing to see, is that Stratford is getting these new generations coming to them, and that they're connecting with these pieces, as long as, you know, it's not your parents' Much Ado. Like they, as I said, they added 3 new monologues. They did things to really kind of add and amplify the show in a really great way. And so I thought it was really, really well done. And, you know, like, I'm now a Much Ado fan. This has definitely moved up my canon rankings of shows. So I thoroughly enjoy it. I don't know, Ryan, as an adaptation man yourself, what did you think of, like, the 3 additional monologues and stuff?
Yeah, so this additional material was written for this production by the Canadian playwright Aaron Shields, who often does a lot of work with Stratford and has a very good ear for writing faux Shakespeare type editions that fit seamlessly within these types of plays. Yeah, you summed them up pretty well in terms of what they do. The one thing I guess I'll comment on that is the one thing that I think is most potent about these editions is the final one, that hero gets to speak at her wedding and kind of holds the men of the play, and by extension the play itself, to task for the bit complicated gender politics around female sexuality that this play puts forward. Because for those who are only familiar with it from this production, you might not realize that the original version of the plot ends with, oh, don't worry, hero is one alive and she was never unfaithful in the first place. And what this monologue that she's given at her wedding is basically like, okay, but even if I was, that doesn't mean I deserve all of the mistreatment you've given me. Gross paraphrase. I'm no Aaron Shields. I cannot say it in beautiful Shakespearean verse. But yeah, that's essentially, so it kind of, yeah, it sort of makes you think like, oh wait, yes, this original ending, while it's very fun and it is the happy end of the comedy, certainly reifies or validates the male view of virginity and female purity as a sign of their value as humans and spouses. And I think, yes, it takes a very intelligent female playwright to come up with, okay, how can we reevaluate this piece to, still be fun? Like you said, that it's not your grandfather's Much Ado. Like, I still think it kind of is. Like, this is a fun, classical Shakespearean comedy, pumpkin pants type production. It's not necessarily, aside from tampering with the text, which I get that some purists have a problem with, but, grow up. It's really... I don't know any other way to say that. Like, if you're complaining that this play has
Shakespeare
been slightly...
is long dead, and he was a man who was very creative in his own right, and I'm sure he would not oppose these changes because it only adds to the story. It's not detracting.
Yes, and he was changing his own source material when he wrote this, so we can do the same. So yeah. No, sorry, Jill, do you want to chime in? You also saw this one. Your thoughts?
We're only doing this in 10 minutes, so I'm coming in.
Coming in, Jill.
No, the good segue to that, though, is I feel like those rewrites, anytime like a classical piece is given a facelift or like a refurbish, I also think you can tell like the actors are having a lot of fun with it as well. And like in those new pieces. And then also, Mac, you had mentioned like the physical comedy in this was absolutely delightful. I was fully cackling, and as was the whole audience. But I did that thing where I was cackling as audience member and as performer, because I'm like, this is just fun. Like, they're having so much fun. I also want to shout out, I thought the costuming was brilliant, like the palette and the colors. Actually, kind of like the orange I'm wearing right now. There was a lot of that going on in the set dressing and in costumes, and kind of like Ryan was saying, the pumpkin pants. But like, I love, like I said, I love seeing like contemporary flavoring and having fun but also mastering Shakespearean text. And Graham Abbey and Met Beattie, like some of the largest Shakespearean masters of our country at the helm of this one. It's just like such a great marrying. And I also do want to I want to shout out the lighting designer. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, Aaron Srinivasan. I actually felt the heat come off of that stage. Like there's multiple times when the characters are complaining of the heat, or it's a hot day, and like that also mixed with the sound designer Thomas Ryder Payne. That duo of sound and lighting, like I felt like I was out sweating in the heat in nature. You even had the actors kind of like tiptoe across the stage when it was like hot. It was just like a wonderful hue in that globular space, like just a warm orange sort of glow around the production. Wow, I feel like that's a really good way of rounding out this production.
I love
warm orange glow.
It was very warm. It's a good warm feeling of that show. You felt the warmth and the love in this piece.
Yeah, it was great. Laughter and love and the rewrites. We are here for it. Kudos to the whole cast and Chris Abraham. And amazing. Okay, so we're going to segue. Before we segue, I'm just going to kind of call back to what I was saying. Again, each of us have 3 plays that were either a favorite or that we want to chat about. So that one, Mac helmed, that was on Mac's list. So now we're going to pivot to a production that Ryan and I got to see, and it was made both of our lists for one shape or another. So this is Casey and Diana, and it happened in their studio, and it's directed by Andrew Kushner. So Ryan, I'm going to lob this one to you for a little synopsis possibly, and we'll jump in.
Yeah, I feel like we should, even though this is a new work and probably one of the best new plays I think I've seen, maybe this theater season, like, and not just the Stratford, I mean, period. But because it is going to be put on Stratfest and it is going to have a revival at Soulpepper, maybe let's not spoil a lot of this as best we can. So yeah, it's this, also the playwright, I don't believe you mentioned his name.
Nick Green.
Okay, yes. So yeah, this is, I don't even know where to begin. This is a really good play. So it's set in the 1980s during the height of the AIDS epidemic. And we are set in a local hospice here in Toronto that is pretty well known. It's called Casey House. And it was a place where people who were afflicted with and dying of AIDS could spend the remaining time of their life and seek palliative care among a safe community of people who would take their needs seriously during a time when most government institutions and hospitals were very reluctant to do so. So, as the title suggests, Princess Diana is an interestingly central figure, but not necessarily a main character in this piece. But what the particular historical episode that it's dramatizing here is that Princess Diana, as part of her tour of solidarity with people suffering with AIDS, paid a visit to Casey House during a royal visit to Canada. And it's about the week leading up to her visit. So while she is a character in the piece, most of the drama is spent with the core cast of characters who we meet throughout, some of whom are patients, others are members of the hospice staff, getting ready for the weekend. The big kind of motivating goal is they all love Princess Diana. They can't wait to meet her. Let's just hope they live long enough to make it to her visit. And in this particular environment, that is no guarantee. So it's a truly harrowing, moving drama about people struggling for their lives, seeking hope, finding community with each other. And yeah, I think this, I'm just getting misty thinking about it. Like, this might just be certainly the best written new play I've seen in a very long time. It is, I think, still my number one of this theater year in my head. Every time I see something new, it is the meter stick by which I compare it when I'm being like, yeah, I liked Master Plan at Crows, but was it as good as Casey and Diana? It's tough. But no, this play is fantastic. Sorry, Jill, it was on your number one of your list too, so I'll let you take it away from
No, I totally agree and echo all that you're saying. Also, my mom is a pharmacist. She specializes in HIV and AIDS. And my sister actually worked for Casey House for several years of her career on like the HR communication side of it. So I have, had in some shape or form the AIDS and HIV have been a part of my life through my mom and my sister kind of contributing either as caretakers or, supporters of the movement. And it was lovely I always admire going into pieces of drama that do touch on that material because it is, I remember little Jill, like 8-year-old Jill, I knew the stories of some of these people, of some of these characters, right? I lived with one. My mom actually reminded me a lot of Marjorie, the character of Marjorie, played by Linda Cash. Hilarious. Like that character, that actor, chef's kiss. But like she is the caretaker who is trying to keep morale up and is, it basically, again, I don't want to spoil too much of it because I really say run to Soulpepper to see the show. But a lot of the scenes in this show are like 2-handers or 3-handers. And if I could bottle up kind of like, to me, every conversation sort of had the same, it's so hard to explain, but had the same thesis or the same like detachment, yet in the same breath, attachment of humanity, and really had you focus on like, what is relationship? What is life? Like, what is wanting? What is needing? And, you see this through the lens of like patients who are dying and ostracized. We also see it in the lens of siblings who are confused and guilty. And you see it through the lens of caretakers who are helpless and also suffering. Their own mental health is at wit's end. And it's just like a really lovely honed in palette of the true stress and depression that was kind of cycling around especially in the 80s and early 90s when a lot of the epidemic was still not figured out. And this idea of Princess Diana coming and this like beacon of light. And again, you see the sort of like embodiment of her in everyone as well. Like, and again, I really don't want to, you're right, Ryan. I don't want to spoil.
There's so many things I want to say about it, but I'm like, that I would feel awful if I ruined some certain twists and turns of the plot that really knocked my socks off.
What I will say in particular of the space, it was done in the studio space at Stratford. The whole stage was the inside of the hospice, like was a patient's room. Like you literally walked into the space and I felt like I had walked into a hospice or like a hospital or like a hotel or something. And then occasionally there would be outside scenes that they would like bring in benches or like pews to make it the church scene. But I just thought it was a very naturalistic, like it really immersed us like into the thick of it. And I think that just heightened the emotions even more.
Yeah.
I also want to shout out, again, I don't want to spoil it too much. All I'm going to say is Sean Arbuckle's physicality, I think is some of the best physicality I have ever seen on a professional stage. Mic drop. Like the dedication and true actor feat. There's a monologue where I don't want to spoil it, but it's basically just a human walking and it's absolutely stunning. I was sobbing. Brian, back to you.
Yeah, like, honestly, I feel like maybe we should just leave it here. Like every time I think of something I want to say about it, I'm just like, oh, that might spoil something. And again, it's just, just take our gushing as indication enough. If it wasn't coming to Soul Pepper and to Stratfest, or if it was just coming to one of those, maybe I would be more inclined to comment because this is a post-season roundup, but because there is so much hope on the horizon for this very devastatingly hopeful play, I think just go see it. You owe it to yourself to see it.
I do want to just subtly shout out, not subtly, I want to fully shout out Sophia Walker, who plays Vera. Sophia Walker had 2 Dora nominations last season, and as always, is like such a pillar of strength in a production. Her character in this doesn't seem central, but every time she's on the stage, like she is central. And I don't mean that like from deterring from plot or taking unnecessary space. It's just she is so dedicated to her craft and making these characters, astronomically different characters I've seen her play across the board, be so true to what the story needs and the essence that she needs to bring. And so I just got to shout out Sophia Walker.
Yeah. And like everyone is so central in this. It's like a small, tight ensemble cast. And I remember even thinking at one point, like, oh, this character that's introduced a little late in the game, like, did we need them? I liked the actor very much, and I won't even single out which one I'm talking about. But I was like, oh, this kind of feels like if we're trimming this new script that maybe we don't need this character. But then the ending makes everything come together in a way that, like, wow, yes, we could not have done without that presence in the piece. So again, just so much. I want to say everything, but yes, maybe we can't. We can't.
Everything I've heard about it has been, for everybody who saw it, was that it was just terrific. So
so run to Soul Pepper and grab your tickets. Maybe we'll pop the ticket link down below as additional linkage to this episode. So now I'm going to link us to our next play, or should I say musical.
Yes.
This one is a production that Mac saw, so it's on Mac's list. So Mac, I'm going to pass you the microphone, and because we're not quite dead yet, because we're going into Monty Python's Spamalot.
That's right. Yes, this is a holdover from the lost COVID season. So was Much Ado, actually. Both those plays were kind of the lost shows that Anthony has slowly but surely been working into these returning seasons to honor the contracts there. So yeah, I mean, Spamalot. I've always known Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail, Life of Brian, but never actually saw the musical. I will say, I thought the cast did a very good job. They were very, very energetic. So this production was directed by Leslie Wade, choreographed by Jesse Robb, and starred the wonderful Jonathan Goad as King Arthur. It also had a plethora of other great performers, including Jennifer Ryder Shaw as the Lady of the Lake. You also had Eddie Glenn as Patsy. So Eddie Glenn and Jonathan Goad both did Music Man back in 2008, where Eddie was Marcellus and Jonathan was Harold. So it's great to see them back together again as Arthur and Patsy. I will say it was a nice shakeup to have a new director doing the musicals this year, because Donna Fiore has kind of had her stamp on a lot of the musicals these past few seasons. So it was nice to see a shakeup in that. And you could tell there's a bit of a different energy in this, where, like, every director kind of has their niches, and Donna Fiore, like every director, has her go-tos that she likes to do. And it was nice to see a different interpretation of a Stratford musical.
So you're saying Leslie had their niches. Sorry, I had to find a pun in there somewhere. I tried to do a pun in the intro. It didn't come out. This is where it came. Sorry, back to you, Mac.
I love it. But no, I mean, like, this was such a fun show. The audience got right into it. This was another sold out show. And I mean, this and Rent were both extended because of their popularity. And rightfully so. The cast, once again, this is a high energy comedy. And, they're working with very iconic material, which, everybody knows: the Killer Bunny joke, the knee joke, the revolting peasant joke, the whole coconut joke. Like, everybody knows those. So it's really kind of like what we talked about a long time ago. I think it was on Hamlet or on Merry Wives or Mackers, where where Bridget was saying, because people know this material so well, you have to be really on your game to beat them to the punch, because there are people in the audience who are almost saying the line as fast as you are.
It's like Rocky Horror.
It is. This really was, because once again, people know the material so well. So it's one of those great things there where they had really good pace and kept the show moving. I will say, no fault of their own, but when Spamalot came out originally, Eric Idle invited the other Pythons to come see the show on Broadway, and their feedback to him was, and they talk about here in the program notes too, was that they said this is kind of like the highlight reel of the Python material. It's not as innovative as you might think it is. You just took all our good material and just kind of re-sausaged it with a new skin. And having now seen it, I can't say they were wrong, because it is kind of just just kind of re-adaptation of the film material. But the cast does a really good job of making it fun and energetic for people. So even though, yes, did I feel like, is this something new and revelatory with the Python material? No, they just took all the classic jokes and put them on a Broadway stage and gave them a musical. I'll give a big shout out to Jennifer as the Lady Lake, because she performed this show while pregnant, and they did not hide her pregnancy. They owned it, and she was performing it to the hilt. And her character is very funny because she comments on the fact she disappears for half the show and then comes back, and it's like, what happened to me?
Yeah,
but she rocks it. I mean, she was great in Chicago the last season, and this season she was great as well as Lady of the Lake.
I love that.
So everybody had a fun time. It was terrific. So I give nothing but praise to the whole cast for what they did with this show as well.
Mac, what was your favorite production element, would you say, of like costuming, lighting, sound, choreography?
I will say the set. They did a lot with that set, and having a lot of fun moving it around and making and using it to their full advantage, because they got to do a lot of different set pieces with flinging the cow and the Trojan bunny and the swallows and the coconuts. Like, they have to do a lot on that set, and they play with the levels and the doors. It was great. And I mean, the whole Camelot Spamalot number that they do in the first act is big. Like, they use every bloody entrance they can get on that stage, and just have people coming in and out. The Laker girls. It's just a whole thing. It's great.
Nice.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Great.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to segue us to our next piece. That was Spamalot. And now we're going to go back to the 80s in a sense.
Still very musical.
With this adaptation. Still very musical. Still a lot of dance. Okay, so we are going to talk about Richard II, which was on my list chatting about, but we all had the opportunity to see it, so we can all chime in. But this production happened at the new Tom Patterson. It was directed by Gillian Kiley, and the cast is illustrious, but our King Richard II was played by the phenomenal Stephen Jackman Torkoff, Emilio Vieira, friend of ours, and the Cup. played Lord O'Merle, and et cetera, et cetera. There's many other wonderful mentions in this piece, but just going to dive in. So
David
Richard
Collins
II,
was in it.
David Collins. Yes. Hello, David. We love you, David. Yeah. So Richard II, not going to give you a synopsis. It's a history play from the Shakespeare, kind of starting us off
A lot of
before
politics.
we get into the Henrys is basically how I like to say it. So this piece for me, kind of why I want to chat about it is because like this, I mean, bits of this whole season has stuck with me now that we're recording this kind of later in the year, and now it's the top of 2024. But this piece in particular, like the images and like vignettes and like artistic liberties and like very different adaptation vibes have stuck with me a lot. And I kind of, I can visualize like some of the scenes. So like we'll unpack that a little bit more. So just to kind of give our viewers or listeners, if you didn't get a chance to see it, basically this adaptation. So Brad Fraser has done a lot of like queer representation adaptation on pieces. And so this basically he infused Richard II with a lot of that. So we follow Stephen Jackman Torkoff playing our King Richard II. And it's set like Studio 54 vibes. There is definite subtle mention to this disease that's kind of creeping into the kingdom, really playing up using King Richard II as this party, kind of carefree, no responsibility king, kind of like love, really hyping on like how the early 80s was a lot of that culture, like free love, dance. And so, yeah, so once again, the HIV and AIDS sort of underbelly was present in this piece through some of our side characters. So why I want to talk about this is because the directorial images that Gillian Kiley kind of placed on the stage for us. First of all, like hats off to probably one of the most, I guess, like daring Shakespeare adaptations that's been on a Stratford stage. I think I'll say it. There was a lot of open queer representation, partial nudity, and it didn't really shy away from the sort of like BDSM vibes that might be present. And the minimalist staging and minimalist prop usage, it kind of gave this like futuristic sort of in-between angelic fluidity. For example, I'll just kind of mention some of the images. So there's like at one point, there's like a mirrored catwalk used as almost like a standoff between Bolingbroke and Richard II. And again, that image is like ingrained in my brain. And I don't think I've still fully unpacked every bit and morsel of that scene, but like I keep going back to like what was happening. Also, there's a point where Stephen is rolled out. They're rolled out inside of like a bag, which you don't really know that they're in there, but I kind of figured it out. And like they're underneath this giant disco ball, and then they're like trapped in this bag. So there was just this very like,
and the neon bars as well.
And then yes, the neon bars. So it very much screamed like late 70s, early 80s sci-fi, weird, free love.
Seedy New York.
Yes, yeah. I will say the images and vignettes have stuck with me. I still am finding, again, like threading kind of like, did all of those choices sort of meet the mark of what this story is? I think some characters and stuff could have gone stronger and had a bit of a heavier hand, like character development in this adaptation. I think a lot of the scenes were really juicy, but again, it kind of comes back to this history is, in my opinion, like the most boring out of all. There's not a lot of like super epic like twists and turns. It's very conspiratorial. So yeah, I wanted to throw all of these like images that are cooking in my brain and get a conversation going. Like how did you two feel about this show?
Mac, you want to go?
Sure. So once again, this play fascinated me. It attracted me because this is one of the lesser done history plays. I mean, this and Henry VI, I think, Ryan, you would agree, are the two least done.
Well, and Henry VI is not done often because there's 3 of them.
Yeah, so there's 3 parts.
Unless you're
and even then,
Henry
IV part 2 is often skipped as well.
Yeah, but
it's always ranked low. It's always ranked low. I mean, I mean, there's a great adaptation with Ben Whishaw doing called The Hollow Crown, where he did this particular part. And I think Patrick Stewart's in it as well.
Yeah, there was a big kind of TV, cast that they assembled for the
So I
entire
knew
area.
of it, but I didn't know all of it, or couldn't remember all of it. So it was, I mean, once again, I heard nothing but great things. When I went, the audience was in leather, like it was a lot of young, youthful audiences, and they were like having a time. But there also was a lot of older audience there too. And what I noticed with the older audiences, they know the history that goes in, like the history that ties in with this piece. So, for example, when you meet the character of Hotspur, he becomes a major character for, Henry V or Hal in Henry IV. Bolingbroke becomes Henry IV. There's certain characters that get set up in this that you could see the audience who knew the history were going, yes. So the fact, you have Hotspur kind of, coming with a baseball bat, smashing things up, being this warmongering character. It's like, okay, well, clearly you're setting up what's going to come down the road with where this guy's going to go and why Bolingbroke likes Hotspur. And we get that great monologue of, where's my son? Oh, he's off partying. We don't see him in this one. But it's like, okay, we know who you're talking about. This like the Shakespearean MCU, where it's like we're gonna plant the little Easter eggs so you know which characters are coming down the road. So a lot of fun. I will agree with you though, Jill, that I don't think everything clicked, and it's mainly because the play itself, and I mean, the play sets it up where Richard is in the wrong a lot of the time, where he takes the money from the David Collins character who is
John of Gaunt.
Yes, Gaunt. Yep.
Yeah, and exiles the son and then steals the money. So, Bolingbroke has every right to be mad, and because Richard II's a petulant party boy. He's not a ruler. And, it's funny, like, it made me think of The Crown, where in The Crown, they have Philip and Elizabeth have this scene after Margaret's covered for the Queen for a bit. And Margaret's saying, I want more duties. But Philip says, she's too individual. The monarchy is not about self. It's about you being a blank slate and being the steadfast, strong hand that people around you rely upon while they spin out and have problems. You are the steady driving force. And the actor who plays Bolingbroke, Jordan Hall plays Bolingbroke. And he does have that classic conservative, strong man energy. And they talk about this in the show notes about how they really did play with that angle of, is it so bad to have a king who's more individual and is open and passionate versus, the traditional male figure? And I appreciated in casting that they didn't go with a white actor to play Bolingbroke. It's two BIPOC actors having two very different interpretations of leadership. And I thought that was a really good touch. I'll say the best and strongest image, well, first of all, was the bath scene with Emilio. Because just the way they used the fabric there was so well done.
So steamy, no pun intended, but very much intended.
Watch it on Stratfest, you'll know what we mean. The other image, though, is the two comrades of Richard II who get hung. And are just left dangling, and the sound design of that creaking branch that they're dangling on, beautiful.
Yeah.
So well done. So the show tried to make Richard more sympathetic, but the play itself doesn't lend itself to Richard being more sympathetic, because you go, Richard, you did this yourself by your actions. You fall not because people around you, backstab you. It's not Richard III. It's where he's conspiring, killing people off. Richard II gets himself into these own situations through his own anger and petulance in the play. So it's like, I can only sympathize with you so much, dude, before I get why people are revolting against you. As much as, I enjoy the party atmosphere, would I want you as a ruler? I don't know if that's the energy I'd want as a ruler. But anyway, that's besides the point. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, like you've both said so much that I probably have little to add. I think, the big draw for this production, in addition to the aesthetics and the time period change and the rewrites by Brad Fraser, I think are our two leads, Stephen Jackman Torkoff and Emilio Vieira, friend of the show, as we've mentioned before. And their chemistry, their relationship is really the anchor.
And they grew up together.
They did, and that they have this history as actors that really, sells their relationship. And in particular, the character of O'Merle, who Emilio plays, is not nearly as large a presence in the original. Like this relationship is very much a product of Fraser's rewriting.
Mhm.
That yes, he's present, he's his cousin, but the fact that they have this very intimate romantic relationship is a new addition. The fact that I think we can spoil this one, maybe.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
Like the fact that O'Merle is the one who kills Richard at the end is an
Yeah.
addition here. Like, I'm sorry, like I know it's like, well, you can't spoil a Shakespeare play. Like, oh wait, I'm spoiling the thing that's new here. But yes, but yeah, so much of these like new decisions are really just things that take the history plays, which I think we all agree that many of them can be dry and have a lot of like moving parts and talking heads, and really finding a beating heart of emotional resonance in here, specifically mediated through this relationship. And hats off to both of them for selling it so well.
Any other closing remarks from any of you?
Watch it on Stratfest. This was a hot production this season. Like, getting a ticket was very hard, to say the least. I almost wasn't able to make it, but thankfully a spot on the Stratford bus opened up and I was able to do it. But yeah, I'd say watch this. Like, this is once again, this is where Stratford is showing this is how you move forward. Because something Bridget and I talked about is Stratford is actively working to try and engage and get more new, younger audience members to come and join and see their shows. And her and I were both saying how this was a very hot, sold out run. And it's like, this shows that people are interested in Shakespeare if you take a new look at it. That doesn't mean, taking everything out of it. It just means, you go in and you re-examine, you add new things in, like the angel chorus.
Yes, I was just going to mention them too. Yeah.
But that's a great edition because it's a historical edition, because there's a very famous painting that's, in the picture program here that shows, the angels and Henry. Or Richard, I should say, Richard. But it's like, there's a way you can do it that makes it fun and exciting. So it's like, this isn't a dead
And they were
play.
constantly dancing and moving. Like, hats off to the ensemble. Plus, just a lot of them were doubled in the production of Rent. Some of them playing leads in Rent. Mm-hmm. And then to have to do the cardio dance party that are the angel tendrils of Richard. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Olivia, I'm looking at you, Olivia Sinclair Brisbane, who also goes on 3-kilometer runs. You're phenomenal and play Joanne in Rent. Just hats off. Anyways, back to you, Mac.
Yeah, but no, that's what I mean. Like, this is an example of what Stratford can do. Same thing with Much Ado. These were shows that took the material and lifted it up out of the text and breathed new life into it through new additions, through reinterpretations that are new and exciting. So I think there's great lessons learned from these two Shakespearean productions we've discussed. And,
Indeed. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to stay in the Tom Patterson Theater, and we are going to segue to our next piece, which Ryan and I had the chance to see, but this was on Ryan's list to discuss. So this is The Wedding Band. So Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, so I kind of cheated a bit because I will say we sort of pitched this episode as us each putting forward a top 3. And I'm not so sure if The Wedding Band makes my top 3, but I think it's an interesting piece and it's a bit of an outlier within the season. So I felt like it deserved mention, and I did enjoy it a lot. It's not like I'm throwing it under the bus. But yeah, I think it's such a rare type of piece to be done, especially on a stage like Stratford. And yeah, I think shedding a little spotlight on it felt nice. So this is a play written by an African-American female playwright, most active in the 1970s. I believe that's when this play was written. Her name is Alice Childress. And it's set in the year 1918, and it's for the most part entirely within this backyard apartment setting where various women and their families live together all under one roof. And we follow a principal character named Julia, played by Antoinette Rutter, who has recently moved into this home because she's had a hard time keeping a place to live, because the big inciting incident of the plot is she reveals to her new neighbors that she has a white lover. And at this particular moment in history, that was quite literally still illegal. And it's a big scandal for all of her neighbors, but they do form this interesting community and they support each other. And it's just a very surprisingly touching piece in a lot of ways, and then it's horrifying in a lot of other ways that I can get into. And Jill, you saw it too, so feel free to chime in as you go. But yeah, so we kind of more than anything, you sort of, I think with a story like this, you think I kind of know where this is going. It's going to be like a love prevails and conquers all and hatred has no place in this environment. But I think what this play does so well is it really takes the culture to task in a way that doesn't, default to easy, perhaps melodramatic answers like that their love will find a way, and kind of really recognizes how all of these characters, but especially our central couple here, are very much products of their upbringing, their environment, the world around them, and that as much as they do genuinely love each other and want to have this relationship and been having this relationship for quite a while now, there are things about their world that don't die so easily or can't easily be overpowered by love. And I think one of the perhaps most brutal elements of this play is a character who plays, well, actually, sorry, I didn't mention that we have our relationship here. Herman is the name of the man. He's played by Cyrus Lane. And we also get to meet his sister, played by Mev Beatty again, and his mother, played by Lucy Peacock. And Lucy Peacock's performance in this is seared into my memory in the worst possible way. Not against her, but like she takes this character. Yes, the character is absolutely horrific. She just, language is failing me to even describe the way that
Lucy can play a great villain when she wants to.
Yeah, and it's just, it's absolutely, whatever you're picturing of a racist old woman of that time, she goes there and then some.
Well, I don't know if anyone tuned into Master Harold and the Boys several years back. It's the same character, Festival, right? Like at Shaw, when James Patrick Daly spits in Andre Sill's face as Harry and Sam. Sorry. That's the level we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and I think, this play is really interesting. There's, I guess I can sort of spoil some broad strokes about this, but a lot of what motivates the plot, especially going into the second act, is the fact that I believe it was the Spanish influenza was particularly what's going on, and, this being set right after World War I, that was a particular thing, and that Herman is afflicted with it and incapacitated, and because of he's in a black household, and because of the nature of the laws and culture of the time, they can't bring medical attention to tend to him, because that will expose the relationship and create a big scandal and possibly get all or many of the characters arrested. So there's very high stakes going on here, that he is dying, and that is what gets his family to eventually come in here. And it feels like there's so much drama just built into that situation enough that you could almost have the hallmarky melodrama version of, but we need to get through this because of love. And then you still have on top of all of that, another truly heartbreaking scene of the two main characters, arguing about, the sacrifices they've made for each other, and how, his situation as a white man, yes, he has sacrificed a lot, but is nowhere near what she has sacrificed as a black woman in the same situation. And I think there's just so much here. Again, I feel so bad that we saw these plays so long ago now, and I remember having so many great feelings about it. There was a really cool setting effect where there was the bedroom that's sort of disconnected to the backyard that moves in and out of the stage. I remember that was quite a highlight in the staging here. Sorry, Jill, please chime in if you remember other things.
I remember. So we saw this as a doubleheader. This was the second show of the evening, and the seating for us in this show was quite tucked. It's almost like we were in the corner of the bedroom set piece.
Right.
So if I would have loved to see it again at a different viewpoint. I think there was some parts of the piece that I missed not seeing facial reactions. I still obviously heard everything and I was following along. But I know when we came off of it, Ryan, not that it didn't sit well with me, but there was something that felt incomplete with it for me. And at first I was like, I think it's the writing, which I still will say some of the writing for me, I think could have, again, cohesion and tying together of scenes and stuff was missing for me. But I think, again, with this piece, now that it's percolated, and you just mentioned, Ryan, it's been a while since we've seen it. I think it is in the miscommunication and inability of communication, rather, between our two characters that was so unsettling and incomplete and frustrating for me.
Yeah.
I think the more that it's percolated, it's not the fact that I'm mad at the piece of theater. I'm angry at the results and just like
What
the
it's
like
representing is upsetting.
yeah, because it wasn't your like it wasn't over the top. It wasn't, I mean, there were moments that were grotesque, but honestly, I would argue the moments that were grotesque were because they were not treated as grotesque. Like they were very matter of fact, or it would come as like a line would come as a punch and then instantly we'd glaze on to the next phrase. So I think it's interesting, like with this piece, again, the more it percolates, I think I would love to see it again. Like I would love to see it remounted and to be able to see it from a different vantage point as well, just to kind of get more invested into some of the, like we saw some of the characters like Bax. They were playing the thrust, but again, where we were tucked, it was like a little bit farther back. I want to mention the little girls. So of the neighborhood that Julia lives in, one of her friends has a little girl. And then one of another neighbor of hers nannies a white neighboring girl. And so I just want to like highlight the, like, again, in the choreography and the subtlety that these two very young actors, you have the program in front of you,
Yes.
Ryan.
There
I know
were
they were double casted, but
yeah. So I'm not sure who we actually saw here because there's like 3 different ones who play them. But yes, I'm sure all of them were probably equally talented and consistent across the board.
Yeah, and just that relationship between these two young girls who are of different race, but the fact that there's like this longing to meet up with each other in the yard and they're playing patty cake or they're running into the house or they're like collecting stuff. And there's like this representation of communication and innocence and naivete that's just represented by these 2 little girls playing as friends. And it just was kind of offered like a boot, like not a boost, but just some sort of levity, right? Like I was saying, a lot of this piece, like the conversations would punch and then you'd go on. And again, I feel like it's like I'm looking back at it and I wasn't recovered from those punches, but having the children playing and listening to each other and to the adults around them and taking in and absorbing, it was just a really interesting, lovely representation of like the next generation that are, coming up in this time of the world.
Yeah. And I think like it's almost a perfect microcosm for the mixed race relationship at the center of the play. And it kind of really shows that if you strip away like all the socialization and just see them as children, racism is something that nobody is born with. It needs to be taught, whether it intentionally or just through osmosis in the culture, that, these are kids who are happy to just play with each other and they're from different racial backgrounds, different socioeconomic classes, I believe, and yet they're still, they don't see these issues the way that their adult counterparts do. But it's still early enough in the history, 1918, that they will probably grow up to become racist against each other. And
so again, there's another gut punch. Yeah.
Although we are spared that in the play itself, but
Definitely.
You can see that future ahead of them, which is, it's another heartbreaking element of this.
Yeah. So a lot of like unsettling emotions for me for this piece, but now that I'm reflecting on it, and again, it's percolated, like very cleverly, brilliantly written. Because it also, I think often enough we see pieces and we're like, great, that was the end of the piece. Or like, oh, I think this meant that for me. And then some plays we close the book on, some plays will be ingrained in our brains in some shape or form. But some pieces of art just live and exist and aren't finite. Right. And sometimes those are the most difficult ones to grapple with,
And I want to even add, like, this is such an interesting artifact to dig up, this play from the 1970s. It's sort of sandwiched between, great cultural flashpoints of prominent Black playwriting. It's sort of post-Harlem Renaissance, but not quite yet at like the August Wilson, Susan Laurie Parks kind of, more contemporary wave that really kind of got a lot of traction in the 80s and 90s. I had never heard of this playwright before, and yet she was very prominent in her own time in a lot of these communities. And I'm glad that Stratford is willing to take a chance on these things that aren't known quantities, that aren't necessarily, a surefire thing, but definitely have something worthwhile to say. And we can get a lot out of it simply by virtue of digging it up. You don't need a lot of bells and whistles to make this play speak.
Definitely. And the actors across the board really like spoke the text absolutely brilliantly. Great. I love that. I think, again, I would love to see this remounted or see this happen on another stage somewhere in Toronto or in Canada. Yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing if this has more of a life. But now we're going to segue to our next piece. It is a classic Canadian piece in a lot of our Canadian theater anthologies. Mac, you had the opportunity to see this one, and this was on your list to chat about. So this is Les Belles-Soeurs. Mackenzie Horner, take it away.
Yes. This is one Ryan and I read together in York University, and I think this was our third year, right?
Yeah.
In Maud.
Yeah.
We read it with Don Rubin. And so, this was directed by a wonderful director, Esther June, who I've seen do a number of stuff up at Talk is Free Theater. And it starred the wonderful Lucy Peacock, who I had worked with at Talk is Free Theater, as she is Germaine, the lead lady who has won these stamps, these lottery coupons. And then you have it's an all-female cast, which is something that's a really interesting pull, as well as that you have a lot of great Stratford actors, performers in this. I mean, you have Shauna McKenna, who plays Lucy Peacock's sister, Irene Poole, who is playing Therese Dubuc, and she is the one that has her aged mother-in-law she brings with her, who she subjects to horrible elder abuse. And that was a turning point in the play. Is everybody was laughing and having fun with, the dichotomy of the woman, the wife having to look after the troublesome mother-in-law. But the minute it turned was when she hits her really hard in the back. And there's a content warning in this program that says, beware of elder abuse. And I was like, okay, what can they really do with this? But they go for it. And the minute that happened, there was an audible gasp in the audience. Because they did not, there's a lot of mothers and daughters who came and saw this play, but I don't know if they realized just how terrible this elder abuse is in this play. I mean, I'd almost forgotten about how bad it was since we read the play so many years ago in school. But what I did love is the chemistry between all these women. You really did feel the community tension in this world. And there are so many great monologue moments in this play that make so many of these women stand out and make them so universal that I was just totally blown away by the chemistry that these women have. And, it's great seeing the different generations of Stratford performers all together, because you have the Lucys and the Shaunas, who are kind of the grand, I don't want to say grand dames, but they are. They're now kind of moving into their Martha Henry era at Stratford, where they have played the leading ladies. They're now playing the more supporting senior roles of the company. You then have the Irene Pools, who are still in their leading lady era, who are still actively kind of. I could easily see Irene one day playing like one of the wives in Merry Wives. Like she's still in that era of her time. And then you have some of these younger performers in here.
Marissa Arhallo, a theater and drama studies grad. Marissa was in it. So
yes, she was. So and I'm pretty sure she plays the one that gets teenage pregnant.
Okay.
In that one, I'm pretty sure she's the one that plays that character. But once again, you get three different eras of women in this one company, and it's really interesting to see, because you're seeing, the past, present, future of Stratford all together, which is a really beautiful thing to see on stage. And it's a rare thing to see that. It is a all-female cast with a female director. A good majority of the lighting and the costume designers are female as well. This was a very pro-woman show, and I think not to be mean to men, but this is a piece that really needs a woman's touch to really understand the underlying dynamics that go into female relationships, because there's a lot of subtlety in the way that they undercut each other and give each other looks and cut each other down. This is a very harsh play with how they portrayed the women of this lower class, and how they feel about one of them getting this grand opportunity to, redo her whole house, because she's got these million stamps that, she has to seal and put in a book. So, it's one of those things there where in order to really capture the power that this play has with the female characters, you needed a female eye in this. And I think Esther did a really wonderful job with that dynamic that that you wouldn't have had with a male director. So I really applaud Stratford for just going for it and going, it's a female director, female cast, predominantly female creative team. You know, we're just going to own that and go
Seems
for
like
it.
the only male on the team was the playwright, Michel Tremblay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But good job writing all these dynamic female characters.
Exactly. Well, once again, like you'll look back at, like, you know, like a TV show like The Golden Girls. A lot of the writers were young gay men. You know, like, and the show director was a male director who directed a majority of the episodes, but is created by a woman. So it's one of those things where I'm not saying a man can't write a woman's role, but I think to get some of the deeper nuances that are in these characters that maybe aren't in the text, but in just the dynamics of who these women are, you know, it takes a different type of eye.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah. I mean, Ryan, do you remember much about the play from us studying it in third year?
I do, and I have studied it more recently. I sadly didn't get to see this production. There's only so many trips you can make to Stratford in a season, and but yeah, I remember the play well. Is there a specific thing you want to question about or follow up on?
No. I mean, like, I mean, like, I didn't remember much of it from third year because you know, being in school, you're reading so much material that it's like. I remember bits and pieces, like I remember the stamps, the fact that all the women steal the stamps at the end, and she's left with nothing. Spoilers. And even then, like the tragedy of her one sister sticking around, but she's the sister that Jermaine doesn't want. So, you know, that falls apart at the end too. It's one of those things there. So I can remember bits and pieces, but I can remember the whole plot, like the elder abuse was something I didn't remember, but it hits physically. You get hit hard by it, and I give full credit to Irene for going for it and really playing the balance of that character. Where on one hand, you do sympathize as someone who you can imagine is this is another woman who's been in a home, who's now forced to live with her family's not equipped to take care of her, but the husband's out working all day. So who does it all fall on? Irene Poole's character, who is frustrated, who has kids of her own, who has to do a lot around the house. There's a whole great monologue about the daily routine of these women. And
I remember that
busy
monologue.
schedule.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you know,
I read it back in second year. And again, it's bits and pieces for me as well.
Yeah.
I read like so many plays.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a solid show. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It had comedy, it had tragedy. I thought it did a really good job. And once again, I applaud Stratford for just going for it and having the female director, female team behind it. I mean, that's something I would applaud. More, I mean, I'm so happy this upcoming season of Stratford has a lot of female directors in it. Like, if you look at the ratio of the directors, Stratford is actively doing, and I applaud them for this one. Once again, they're evolving, they're growing. They're not like, you know, they've taken these lessons that was talked about during the pandemic to heart, and we're seeing active change. It wasn't just words, you know.
Yeah.
Like you see some companies who, you know, put out the statement at the time saying we're going to do better, but we don't. The proof has not been in the pudding. Stratford, you know, it's a big machine. It takes time for things to change and grow, and this is definitely a production that is just like Richard II, Much Ado, is moving in these positive directions, and we're going to see more of that this upcoming season as well with their material too. So brava.
Yeah.
So there we go. All right.
One thing, to add to just the costumes of this piece were striking. Like, even I didn't get a chance to see the show, unfortunately, but like, of all of the Stratford's advertisements this year, I always watched Les Belles-Soeurs one because I just kept, like, it was so captivating. Like, the costuming was stunning. Even so I could just imagine in the full production.
It was great. I mean, once again, costume design was by Michelle Bond, who did that. And she, you know, I mean, what's great is that style's coming back, like that vintage late 60s.
I was like, I want to wear that dress. I want to wear that dress. And
it's
I want
all coming back. Which I mean, and I love that because, you know, the 60s was such a cool style of fashion that, you know, Jackie O, right? Like, it's that era of outfit. So, you know, it's coming back. And I agree with you. Like, you know, the way they even dressed the women said so much about who they were as characters. That I was like, you pay, Michelle as the costume paid attention to detail here. It wasn't cookie cutter of these women all coming from the same class, so, you know, we're just gonna have same dresses but different patterns. Like, no, even though yes, there may be similar dress patterns, There's accessories, there's smaller details that show.
And I love
everything
that.
about
And like,
this
and
movie.
as a performer, as an actor, like that just adds so much to your playground. I'm such that performer that's like, even early days in rehearsal, if I know what color I'm wearing or like what vibe I'm going to be wearing, I will start wearing like rehearsal-esque things that are in that color palette or style. So like, oh, that's so neat to know that like even down to the accessories, there was a lot of individuality there, which is great.
100%.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, so now we're segueing. Again, segue is the word of the episode, brought to you by Jillian Robinson. I don't have a great segue for this, so we're just going to open it up. We're going to talk about grand magic. So,
poof, segue. Magic.
It's magic. It's gone.
Amazing.
It's like those coupons for Germaine. They just disappear all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So Ryan and I got to see this one again a while back. And this
was our first trip to Stratford this season, so it is probably farther back than even any of the others.
Yes. But there is moments that are ingrained in the brain. We'll unpack. But this, Brian, was on your list to discuss. So I will volley the mic to you, good sir.
Okay, and this is the payoff to the thing I said at the beginning of the wedding band segment about how I cheated and didn't necessarily pick my top 3, but I picked 3 I wanted to talk about. Because this play is weird, man. It's so weird. And I wanted to talk about it because similar to me applauding Stratford for choosing a play that people had never heard of, like The Wedding Band, I feel like less people have probably ever heard of this play.
Never knew this play.
Yes. And so this is a play. It's an old, like, Italian modernist play from, like, the early, maybe, like, mid 20th century. It's so the playwright's name is Eduardo de Filippo. I had never heard of him before, but watching the play, I think there's a very specific frame of reference that I brought to mind, and it's Luigi Pirandello, another probably the most famous Italian modernist playwright, who is best known for the play 6 Characters in Search of an Author. But what people who only know Pirandello from that one most famous play maybe don't realize is that most of his plays are really weird. Like 6 Characters is weird too, but in a way that we've gotten used to due to its fame, I think. But a lot of, at least my encounters with this particular period of sort of vaguely futurist adjacent Italian modernism is that, there's an interesting preoccupation in the dramas, and so many of Pirandello's lesser known plays, many of which I've read, kind of encounter this, and I see it very much echoed here in Grand Magic, is this preoccupation thematically with the idea of illusion versus reality. What is real? What can we trust as reality? How do we know that the thing in front of us is reality? And this play, with this emphasis on magic in the title, is pretty much just a quite long. I remember I feel like it was pushing like close to 3 hours and 3 acts, and each act being very different than the one that preceded it, is this interesting treatise on this idea. So, brief plot summary, because people, if you didn't make it out to see this one, you probably have no idea what this play even is. But it's about essentially a magician character. His name is Otto Marvuglia. Apologies, I'm going to stumble over the Italian names here. He's played by Garrett Wynne Davies, longtime Stratford veteran. And he's essentially a con man. We're first introduced to him in the words of people who have seen him perform before and are amazed by the things that he was able to do. A lot of hypnosis infuses his magic, and he makes people believe things that they know are not true, but how is this possible that I believe this thing? And we hear these testimonies from 2 people who have seen his shows before, played by our friend David Collins and Steve Ross, who are later revealed to be goons working for the magician who talk a big talk about how amazing he is to generate a lot of buzz for his shows, and then are kind of essentially audience plants, or other people serve as audience plants to, wow people at, wow, this really is the most amazing magician we've ever seen, but he's a con man, it's all a ruse. And the plot is essentially set in motion because there is this very stuffy, I want to say like wannabe aristocrat type character played by Gordon S. Miller, very expertly played by Gordon in my opinion. He's always good in everything he's in, who is very megalomaniacal and possessive of his wife. And he doesn't want her talking to any other men. He's like, no, you are my trophy wife and you should only devote your attention to me. But she is having an affair with another man and wants to run away with him, or at least the man wants her to run away with him. So this other man, this wealthy man, pays our magician protagonist to make this woman, this object of his affection, disappear so she can run off with him, and trick the controlling husband into thinking that this is actually an act of magic through various manipulative means. And so what essentially the thrust of the play becomes is that we have this very unlikable character who is tricked by this other kind of like more charming but similarly unlikable character into believing that his wife is inside this very tiny box. But and so it's like this is absurd. Of course, my wife isn't in this box. To which the magician says, "Well, if you don't believe she's in the box, she won't be in there. She'll disappear. So if you think that your wife," and it was sort of tied up into her marital fidelity, that if you believe your wife is unfaithful, she will not be in the box. But if you have 100% confidence that she is, you will open the box and sure enough, she will be in there. So he's left with this box that sort of a Schrodinger's cat type situation that I'm afraid to open it because if his suspicion is correct that there's no way she's in this box, that will prove the point that she was unfaithful to him. And so therefore he goes mad with this box, thinking that his wife is in it. He can't open it because it's a very interesting situation. And as I said at the outset, this is really engaging with this recurring theme in this particular period of high modernism in Italian drama, is that it is playing with the concept of illusion versus reality as Gordon's character goes further and further off the deep end, as we see escalating in each act of buying into the illusion because he's so far gone, has a bit of a sunk cost fallacy that he goes, for lack of a better word, absolutely insane in the situation. And it's really wild. And I think what this play does well in terms of its engagement with this theme is that we, the audience, are privy to the situation. We get to see the things that this character doesn't. So we know what actually happened to his wife, that he is just being tricked by this con man magician. But as far as he's concerned, this is the reality game he has to play in order to not confront the fact that his marriage was in shambles, his wife wasn't faithful to him. And so I think, it's interesting because if we view it from Gordon's character's perspective, there is a pretty reasonable reason to question the illusion versus reality, but we, the audience, are given this privileged vantage point overseeing the reality to understand what's really happening here. And, I love this kind of thing when Pirandello plays with it in some of his various other plays too. And I thought it was definitely interesting here. But it's weird. And I think part of what I was interested, or why I got excited to see this play, is because there was a very rave review about it in Intermission magazine. Ashley Murphy and Liam Donovan both saw it, and they had a dialogue-based review. I wonder where they got that idea from. But it was the two of them kind of talking back and forth, and they were both floored, blown away, talking about this show. And I was like, okay, well, these are two critics who I have the utmost respect for. I usually tend to agree with their opinions on things, and if they're blown away by this, I never heard of this play, but I'm down to see it. And I think I left it a little lukewarm, probably because my expectations were set so high because of that. I think they raised some interesting points in that review about how it's this is so foreign to what Canadian audiences, especially at Stratford, expect of the models of dramaturgy we encounter. There's really no recognizable counterpart in Shakespearean dramaturgy or American dramaturgy, that this is really its own thing, that unless you are familiar with this particular era of Italian drama, will completely sideline you of what is this play doing. And sometimes, in my opinion, not for the better, but I do admire, again, the boldness of Stratford for choosing a piece like this. And of course, the two showstoppers that do need to get mentioned, these are both appear in Act 2, is, our leads from Richard II, Stephen Jackman Torkoff and Emilio Vieira, come on for these very highly caricatured interludes. Stevens comes on as somebody who the magician owes money to, who's come with a gun and is ready to reclaim the debt, and then kind of gets themselves embroiled in this whole, magic convoluted plot line. And then Emilio's character is this funny detective who, huge scene stealing moment. He is this hilarious caricature. I know Emilio, we talked to him after the show, and has a lot of older Italian men in his life that he was able to model this character on, but was such a hilarious, over the top character, completely in control, but a real Keystone Cop through and through. And also the night we saw it, the carpet got flipped up in one moment, and Emilio, without skipping a beat, like swiveled around and kicked the carpet back in place. Like, it was like such a perfect fluid movement. Like, if I didn't know that wasn't part of the blocking, I would just think like, wow, how did they make that happen so perfectly to set up that movement? So those were like two real standout performances in this very stringy piece that maybe goes on a little too long and meanders in some interesting ways. But, you know, I like seeing weird theater, even if I left this one being like, oh, I'm not sure what I watched. I kind of like that you can go to Stratford and not be like, yep, that was a Shakespeare play that I'm familiar with that didn't necessarily make any bold creative swings. This is a weird play. I don't know if it always worked, but I thought it was interesting enough that even many months later now, I still kind of wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Jill, you saw it too. Anything you want to add?
Yeah. I'm basically echoing all of what you said. Also, Amelia, I'll have you know, a lot of people in the audience after post show were saying, oh, that detective actor, he's so good. Like everyone was really feeling your performance. And yeah, I do have to shout out Emilio and Steven. This piece, you again unpacked it, Ryan, but like there's definitely parts of this piece because it's kind of like weird and the language is sort of abstract and weird. As actor performer, I would imagine you had to do a lot of gymnastics to kind of like believe what you're saying or like put a swing on what you're saying and have it be tied to this already kind of, you know, wonky like blueprint of a plot that you kind of have going in on it. So just kind of hats off to the whole cast making a meal. Okay, this is really weird what my brain has done with this piece, but I'm going to share it anyways. Because like we're in this sort of like resort town. I also had just binge watched White Lotus prior to this. So maybe that's why I was like in vacation mode. But there's a lot of images that from this play that stuck with me that remind me of postcards. Like, so like the initial scene of like the waiters setting up the lawn chairs and the umbrellas. Like I just had this snapshot on like an old like vintage camera of like that image. Or you had like the lovers when they escape in like this tiny car that sort of goes around the periphery of the stage, similar to like Serving Elizabeth. You had our characters kind of go around the periphery of the stage to show like passage of journey and time. Again, I just picture, I think it's Beck Lloyd and was it Jordan Hall that was?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. I picture them like, again, there's like this image of them smiling and going off together. Again, I'm like snapshot.
In this boat that they kind of like Fred Flintstone walked across the stage. Like
yeah. Or the moments when like Garrett Wynne Davies was again doing this magic, the magic thing. Okay, which also is interesting. The show is called Grand Magic, and it absolutely was not at all what I expected.
There's no magic whatsoever. It's all fake and not even.
Yeah, like they have a magician on like supervisor. It's going to be like Garrett Wynne Davies is a magician and an actor. Like this is nuts. Like,
this is not Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. There is no magic on this stage. It's just people talking and tricking each other into thinking there's magic.
Which that's kind of cool. Like in a way, as an audience member, I was put under a spell because that was not at all what I was expecting, you know? And it's kind of like, bam, you put that cloak over my head because again, I was constantly being like, you know, where are we swiveling? What are we doing? And then hearing the big monologue text being like, again, my actor brain was like, okay, what are we unpacking? Oh, that line. Like there's a lot of lines from this piece that I'm like, oh, that line resonates with me. Or like, ooh, if I was reading this text, like I would definitely highlight close reading moments and be like, get into the nitty gritty and the juiciness of what's going on, the politics of what was going on when this piece was written. Yeah, so that was kind of a tangent, but I just have, again, I have these like vignette or these little like old like Polaroid picture images that I thought were quite striking throughout the whole piece. And it was really neat to see like David Collins and Steve Ross's characters, like the ones that you get the impression they've kind of been a part of the con for quite some time, and to really see their life kind of spiral and them like just to see the sheer like exhaustion and the manipulation that they've been under. And it's that feeling of like when you have a dream or a nightmare and like you really want to wake up, but you just won't, or like you can't get out. Like these people are pinned against, they can't get out of this situation, similar to like can't get out of the box. You have to make the decision. Do you go in? Do you go out? Yeah. So a lot of, again, this is a thinker piece and it's still percolating, I think, for me. Grand Magic. But yeah, any last remarks?
Yeah,
Ryan?
no, I don't know. Like, it's, again, I don't know if it worked, but it was compelling. I honestly feel like it seems like almost that maybe this play would be a better fit for the Shaw Festival than the Stratford Festival.
True,
Because I
fair.
think a lot, like, it's very different than Shavian dramaturgy, but it's still maybe closer to the realm. I think of like recent plays we've seen at Shaw, like The Apple Cart this past season, or Too True to Be Good this season before. Yeah, where it's just like a lot of, meandering plots, talking head characters that, are clearly thematically linked across the long stretches of time that it takes to get from point A to point B, but doesn't necessarily have the tightness that we tend to associate with Shakespearean dramaturgy, where the plot sort of soars across in this way. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's not that I necessarily expect to see a play like this at Shaw, but I think it does throw a lot of people for a loop to see this at Stratford. I feel like as we were leaving, in addition to people saying, wow, Emilio as a detective was amazing, a lot of people were just being like, I'm not sure if I got it, but I liked it. It was neat. And I think that that is just like a great way to, it's sometimes okay to not get things, that if they kind of just do make an impression on you, and that, again, months later, we're still thinking about it, that is certainly worth its while.
Right. Speaking of making an impression, this next piece we're going to talk about, and the last piece to round us out, really did leave an impression on me, and I'm still thinking about it. And everyone knows I love dance-esque theater. I've talked about it on many Cup episodes. So this is Frankenstein Revived, and it was directed by Morris Panich, and happened at the Avon Theater, which it had been a while since I had seen a show at the Avon. So it was lovely to be back in that space, because again, I didn't get an opportunity to see Spamalot. So this definitely was one of my favorite selections of the season. And first of all, Frankenstein Revived, I did not know anything going in. I did know Frankenstein, classic Gothic OG novel, Mary Shelley. I read it in grade 11, absolutely obsessed with the plot. I haven't had a chance to see Mary Shelley with Elle Fanning, but it's on my list. I love the story.
Not bad.
We covered Frankenstein, the National Theater at Home production.
Yeah, with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller.
Yes. So there's many opportunities for you to be exposed to Frankenstein. So if you haven't, go on out there and read SparkNotes or Wikipedia. I'm not going to go into the plot. Or read the book, yes.
Yeah, don't SparkNotes. Don't for them.
Read the novel. Put your phone down.
It's not as bad as you think.
So I just remember seeing the promo. There was a lot of I was like, oh, maybe this is just an adaptation with Mary Shelley, the creature, and Dr. Victor Frankenstein. But then it wasn't until right before we saw it that I realized this had a very heavy ensemble cast. And Kyla Musselman, who is in Spamalot, who's also one of the co-hosts of Tits and Teeth, the musical theater podcast with Jennifer Thiessen. Sorry, also plugging. Love that podcast. Podcast love. Kyla, I know, is a beautiful, stunning, and accomplished dancer. So I'm like, oh, okay. And there was a lot of carryover for Spamalot in this as well. So I was like, So we get to the theater and talk about
Devin.
Yes. Oh, so good. So good. So we get to the theater, Ryan and I, and talk about grand magic. Once again, I'm kind of thrown for a loop. This whole piece is like a Frankenstein ballet, in a sense. There is no verbal text. It's all through movement and gesture and the specificity of choreography from a fight perspective, an intimacy perspective, and moving set piece perspective was so tight. Quite literally, there is a needle and a thread, and you are suturing up a perfect wound. You are creating this creature that was Frankenstein Revived, where every little bit, every little morsel took the team's, this cast chemistry was stunning. So, okay, I'm just absolutely word vomiting my experience, but yes, we do follow the lens. It's interesting. This was kind of like a multi-layered adaptation. So it was, you're following Dr. Frankenstein throughout the plot, the movements, the interactions with the people in his life, similar to how the novel unfurls. But then you have Laura Connell, who plays Mary Shelley, actively writing, with a quill and paper in the back. And then also using the magic of theater to instigate a moment for Dr. Frankenstein, or to subtract something and create an obstacle. So you're seeing the author, Mary Shelley, sort of manipulate her own piece while the piece is unfurling in front of us. So it's this very multi-layered sort of duality you have going on of like the chicken and the egg almost. It's like we're watching a production of Frankenstein. We're also watching Mary Shelley create Frankenstein.
Right.
And just the fact that was all done in no speaking and just gesture and dance. And again, precision of moving these large set pieces. And again, how they had swings and understudies for this blows my mind because, and some of them were on multiple tracks, which again, like I said, like the choreography in this was so finite and so specific that if you missed a breath, if you missed a hair, if you missed a corner of a table, it's going to show. Yeah. And how do you maneuver that? How do you work around that? And how, like, so the fact that some of the performers we were seeing on the stage were our understudies flawlessly going by, or even in some moments, there were some moments where Trevor Pat, there maybe was a choreo that sat a little bit different, or like there was a moment where you could tell, again, as like actor audience watching it, I could tell that maybe wasn't the choreo, but the fact that they just breathed together and just maneuvered through that and supported each other was brilliant. Devin Michael Brown. Okay. Devin Michael Brown. Big fan of Devin Michael Brown. Devin Michael Brown.
Who's married to Heather, who was in Richard II.
Okay, great. Everything I've seen Devin Michael Brown in, phenomenal dancer and performer. But like the technique that Devin has in their dance skills is absolutely phenomenal. And there's a bit in this where Devin and Marcus fight as Creature and
Henry Talbot.
Henry Talbot, yes, his character.
Who's best friends with Victor Frankenstein.
It's this like,
and possibly lovers.
And possibly
in this production at least.
But like the fact that it was like ballet infused.
It's West Side Story.
And the most like grotesque fight I've seen on stage in a while. And the fact that Devin can throw his body onto and over a stretcher. Like the sheer physicality. The sheer physicality that takes and physique. Like you get to, everybody in the audience was like, I'm never going to see something this astonishing in my life.
It's like he's made of rubber.
It is. Yeah. Just so in tune with their body and specificity. And I want to say like this whole cast was so taking a page out of that book, Ryan, like was like a rubber, like the fluidity of this. And it just, you could tell like people were getting emotional by the sheer fact of, it's amazing how much a story can be told in just movement and gesture and all of the elements of theater that exist. You take speaking text out of it. It is your heart. You can, without words and song, you can hear your heart beating in the moments that count. And yeah, it's just, again, it's a piece that's really resonated with me and has stuck with me. I'm rambling and fangirling. One of you, take the quill. Take the quill from me.
Sure.
Yeah. Mac, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, so Ryan and I have talked about this piece off mic. I forget how we got onto it.
Oh, it's because I saw it like a couple days before you did, and you were like, "Oh, how is it?" And I'm like, "How do you feel about ballet?"
Which I love ballet.
Based on how you feel about ballet is a kind of determining factor of whether or not you will enjoy this piece.
I mean, once again, so funny Ryan brought this because Ryan knows I wasn't the biggest fan of some of the movement choices in the National Theatre production where we spend like 20 minutes at the beginning just watching Benedict Cumberbatch run in a circle, which was annoying as all heck. I was like, move this plot along. This is good movement theater. This is what every piece of movement theater should watch because people sometimes interpret movement theater as let's be muddled, let's be interpretive and, like not be clear to the audience. This piece had a bit of that where like they were abstract, like the whole graveyard and body robbing scene where they're all contorted. That's very abstract. That's not literally them just, lying in a coffin. They had their bodies mangled and it was great. But they were very specific. They knew the story they were telling and knew when to be a little bit chaotic and very concise.
Yeah.
And that's what made this piece work for me. And it was like watching Jerome Robbins doing West Side Story. It was elevated musical theater ballet, where there's a lot of balletic moves, but at the same time, the fights were very Jerome Robbins, where if you watch, the OG West Side Story, the Rumble fight, where they're doing, grand jetés and things like that and moving around that way. I've got very good Jerome Robbins vibes from this piece. And I mean, it's funny. So you brought up Devon. So Devon is a very good partner with Donna Fiore. He does a lot of her shows. Actually, that's how he met his wonderful wife, Heather, who also does a lot of the musicals there. They met during a Donna Fiore show. But Devon's ability to do these flips is something that Donna Fiore loves to incorporate into every production she does with him. And sometimes it works. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if that flip was needed there. Like, we're doing Fosse, we're not doing but flips and chaotic tricks here. Like, anyway, besides the point. Anyway, but that being said, Devon is always a scene stealer with that flip. Even if sometimes it dramaturgically doesn't work. And I was like, this is a dance piece. They're going to have to get Devon's special trick in here because it is so cool to see him do it. Because he just goes for it and flies like a bird across the stage. And their way they did it in this, where it's part of the fight, and the fact that it's when the creature literally rips the scarf from around his neck, which then perpetuates him to do this turn, was perfect. I was like, that's the way you incorporate a dancer's special trick. Because dancers do have special tricks they do, whether it's a death drop or something that is their move that they can do really well, that is special to them. And I was like, they're going to get that in there because Devon is a very strong dancer, and they're going to feature that. So even Spamalot had that flip featured in their choreography too. But I was like, how are you going to do it? Because this piece doesn't strike me as a piece where you're going to be wanting to do acrobatic flips. And then they did it, and I was like, smart. Check mark to you. You figured out a very organic way to get that in there. I applaud that. The one thing Ryan and you and I both talked about is the inclusion of Mary Shelley in this piece. So in the program notes, they talk about how Frankenstein came to Mary Shelley in a dream, basically. The story of Frankenstein came to her in a dream. And this is kind of that dream that she is then interpreting and writing down. I think they could have gone further with having her in it. I think they could have swapped her out for Victor and someone, to swap her out for the creature. And someone had her play those roles versus her always just filling in the back. Because I was like, Laura Condell is terrific. And that's why I got confused with this piece at first. Because before Ryan told me it was all movement, I went in going, okay, so maybe the Frankenstein pieces whereas the scenes from Frankenstein will be the dance movement pieces, and the scenes with, Mary Shelley and her husband, who I thought was going to be a character in this, those would be the dialogue play book scenes, but it was all movement. And, Laura is terrific in that beautiful black dress that she wears. She moves and glides through the stage. But for me, I'm like, because she's the author and this is her dream, I would have loved even more. Like, have her play some of the roles. Like, have her play the Undertaker who's pushing the body cart and moving the bodies, Get her in there, because she's been the one that's manipulating and forming the story. It's her choices of what's going to happen that drive the piece. So I think they could have gone further. So if they were doing a remount of this, that'd be my one note, would be get Mary Shelley more involved. If you want to have her as a character, you got to get her more involved, and not just with Quill and Book. Have her, be active in scenes. Have her be part of one of the fight scenes, or, swap her out and have her be the creature that kills Elizabeth,
Yeah, right.
Like, because that's a very bold choice. I mean, back then, the choice to have her be killed off on her wedding night, which then ultimately goes on to inspire future filmmakers with Bride of Frankenstein down the road, where they expand on that concept of a bride for the creature. But the fact that, this virginal woman is killed on her wedding night is such a gothic horror cliche, not cliche, but thing now. Having a woman be the one that's going to snap her neck is such a very powerful image, I think, there, where you could have gone something along the way with that. And also, I think just the dynamic of the creature also being Mary Shelley, who, you know, is fighting against the male patriarchy. I think you could have had some really cool dynamics that could have elevated the piece that much higher. But Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, well, you and I have talked about this before, so you know what I think, and Jill has expressed these to you. But for the record, I do agree with this, and I would even take it one step further than what you're saying, Mac, is just the extent to which Laura was featured heavily in the marketing for this show, and the program notes, this little dramaturgical essay that precedes
It's on the poster.
Yeah, she's on the poster, and the dramaturgical notes in the program really emphasize, you know, how path-breaking it was, that Mary Shelley, you know, she was at Lord Byron's party and she spooked all the boys by writing the best horror story ever created, and, you know, she gave women a voice. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, a leading figure in first-wave feminism, and that obviously influenced a lot of her, you know, her life, her ideas, her writing. It's just like so much about how women in this period were basically, you know, arm candy for their husbands. They weren't given agency, and Mary Shelley really did break open these floodgates. And the extent to which Mary Shelley is used in this piece after all of that fanfare in the marketing and in the program, I kind of feel like she became a prop in what I felt like was supposed to be her own story. And if the stated goal is to give back her agency to show how integral she was to shaping the story, making it how it was, it kind of felt like a marketing ploy more so than something that was actually inherent to the piece. And that's not anything against Laura's performance. I thought she was a striking stage presence throughout every time she was on stage. But I agree with you, Mac. I would have liked to see her do more, to be taking more of an active role in creating this piece, not just occasionally sitting with a quill and at one point kind of like puppeteering the creature. It felt like such a missed opportunity when it was clearly something on their minds in this creation process that they didn't go further with these ideas.
Especially with the title like Frankenstein Revived. Like now that we're kind of unpacking too, like if you are going to revive this classic, and we've talked about this kind of throughout this episode of like adapting new pieces or why you're making the choices that you're making. Yeah. Like go there, like go to the farthest extent, or you have her there moving with the quill. Why not take her the step forward and have her in the plot, like Mac's saying? Yeah, I see that. And it's fascinating to me how, again, like the Gothic novel is born out of an era where, women were forced in corsets and you have a role and you stay in that role and you lift your pinky when you drink your tea and you are Ryan said, the arm candy. So like, dramaturgically, just as a shout back to the choreography, I think that's lovely how we have these moments. And especially I'm thinking of Kyle Musselman because she's such a joy to watch.
Incredible.
Her Elizabeth just having so much life and so much vivacity and really having these sharp and flitty like musicality in her movements, and then boom, when her neck breaks, like, or again, pairing the moments of Mac, you had mentioned like the great, like you have these bodies swiftly moving these pieces and these big set pieces and working together as an ensemble. And then boom, they're like these like grotesque body parts that are like shifted and stark. And I think that's a really cool segue of, you know, back the Gothic era. And what Mary sort of, as a pioneer, it sort of led that sort of grosser, grotesque looking at or view of politics in that time period, right? Of taking us from this fake facade of like, you know, life and then cracking the bones on it like that.
Yeah.
But literally.
And I will say, like, I hope I don't seem too down on it. I did enjoy this piece a lot. I think it was, yes, the movement was stunning. It was very well created. I just kind of think it was being mismarketed from a few different angles. And
I agree with that.
And like, I don't know. I think you're absolutely right, Mac, that like there is a legibility to the movement here that I think is what sells it. That even if you've never encountered this story before, you can follow along exactly what's happening. And if you have encountered it before, you can kind of be one step ahead in your mind of like, oh, I see what scene we're creating here. And it's creating a very readable, easy to interpret way that maybe like if they had marketed it as a ballet or an abstract movement piece might have alienated people. Like, I don't think I'm going to understand this. That by selling it as this, an adaptation about Mary Shelley, I think they maybe got more butts in the seats than something that might have been more true to what the piece could have. Sorry.
Well,
Jill,
you know what's lovely is that when Ryan and I went to see it, there were a ton of school groups there. And
Yes,
again,
there was.
I read this book in grade 11 and I loved it, but I knew a lot of my classmates did not like it, or they thought it was dry, or they didn't understand or didn't want to dive into the themes and
they didn't appreciate this book, Jill.
Sure. But like what I love is now, talking it out too and being with all those school groups is like those students saw a totally different adaptation of the novel that they're reading in school. Like they got to see Frankenstein in a different lens. And that's, I find so important, right? Especially in like an education setting. And those that maybe can't dive into the text or don't want to, then there's like a more kinesthetic version for you to sink your teeth into.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and something I would even add to that is that let's not forget, like, we're all familiar with the source material, and we've seen other, like, more or less faithful play adaptations to it, but I think for the general public, maybe a lot of the people in your grade 11 class who were not, engaging with the novel, it's because you think Frankenstein, you picture Boris Karloff, you picture the cartoon Halloween monster, you picture Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, and any number of other, any number of other like Universal monsters inspired cartoonish representations. So like it's already a bold move to take it so faithfully back to the source material and be like, you want Frankenstein? Well, this is Frankenstein. And then
even got the sea captain in there at the end too.
Exactly. Yeah. And to do it in such a visually compelling way, I like, hats off to it. And I do hope that those school groups that we encountered who probably did just read the novel did get something exciting, maybe not even like a new perspective on the novel, but an idea of what theatrical adaptation can achieve.
Absolutely.
That you don't have to just present something in a straightforward way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Okay, friends, we've made it to the end of our personal Cup of Hemlock Stratford 2023 Roundup. Again, mentioning all of the productions, unfortunately, as the three of us, there is only the three of us, and we all have lives in the industry and other veins. So, and are starving artists. So we could not go out to see the entire season, but we do give a huge congratulations and bravo to the 2023 season. Again, I think things are kind of picking up back to the quote unquote normal way of seeing live theater and doing full-fledged seasons and productions. And I think I just want to mention here too, like, hats off to companies coming back into the game. Like, we still are very much in pandemic. COVID is still swimming around in different variants, but we are back on stages and we are back doing full-fledged seasons inside of theaters. And so, it's exciting that once again, another season has passed us, and an illustrious season filled with different styles, different themes. We had themes talking to each other. We had, I also noticed, just as a broad statement, a lot of actors that were doubled in like genres or plays that I haven't seen them doubled in past seasons. So that shakeup was lovely as well. So recapping, reiterating what Mackenzie's saying is, let's keep going forward. Let's keep evolving. Let's keep throwing art onto our stages, regardless if it is finite or infinite. It'll stick with some, it'll leave with others, but that is art. That's the beauty of art. And on that micro TED Talk, we'll do our little sign-offs. So, Mac, where can folks find and follow you?
Well, they can follow me at Mackenzie Horner, all social media platforms. When this comes out, Ron, I think our season 1 of Gallivant over on Before the Downbeat Musical podcast will have wrapped, and we will be getting ready to drop the last back 7 episodes of season 5. So if you're wanting to check that out, come on over, check it out. We do all types of fun conversations. We actually will be covering La Cage aux Folles, which is a show coming up this coming season at Stratford. And as I mentioned, we will be wrapping up our season of season 5 with Spamalot that was done this season. And we've done Rent. That was our big season 2 finale episode. That was like a 2.5 hour deep dive discussion where I terrifically convinced Autumn to change her views on Rent.
And then she went on to direct a very good production of
Yeah,
Rent
and then she
Truly
completely
Wrong.
changed them back. So
No, she did not. I refuse to
keep
accept that. Anyways. Anyway, but yes, check that out before the Deputy Musical podcast. Lots of great musical content there. Jill and Ryan have both appeared on the show.
That's
You can check out those episodes. And you can follow me at Mackenzie Horner on social media platforms.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Brockovich, where can friends find and follow you?
No need to find and follow me personally, because I'm not very active on social media, but if you like me and all my theater thoughts, many of them tend to live here on Cup of Hemlock Theatre. Hey, that's the show you're watching right now. Mm-hmm. So you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, not calling it the other thing, at COH Theater. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's Cup of Hemlock Theater on YouTube, or Cup of Hemlock Theater podcast and all the podcast places. Like, share, subscribe. You know how the internet works. You get it. You found this somehow.
Nice.
How about you, Jill?
I always love when Ryan does that because I'm like, oh, great. I don't have to plug our socials. They are covered on to me. No, yeah. So you can find and follow me at Jillian.Robinson96. It's my artist Instagram account. At the time this recording is going out, I think I mentioned this on a past episode, but I am mentoring a production of Legally Blonde happening at Art House Theater with one of the student cohorts there. So that's going to be going up February 15 to the 17th. So come on out and check it out. Yeah. And then just anything else on my page, funny stories and musical ditties. That's basically where I'm going to say that's most of the footage on my page. So great. Yes. Once again, too, I want to plug Stratfest at home. It is a lovely service. If you can't make it out to see some of the shows, or if you had to miss a show, Stratfest at home is a lovely platform where you can see previous productions. And like we chatted about, Casey and Diana, Much Ado About Nothing, and Richard II will be coming on Stratfest at home.
Richard III from last season is going to be there as well. They're uploading that one.
Yeah. There's also lovely, just like other viewing opportunities on that streaming.
Shows are on there too. Richard Azunian has done a whole mini series with a large chunk of the company now, where I know Lucy got a single, kind of like a one-woman show. Shauna did too. So there's also a lot of great artist interviews in there too, like a lot of creative discussions, and there's even some older versions too. What is it on? Long Day's Journey into Night, I think, is one of the ones they do.
The kind of like film version of that they have on there. There's also like
CBC
just because the pandemic is over, big quotation marks there, and we're all going back out into the theater, doesn't mean that we don't still have a place for these beautiful pro shots that preserve these great productions from the past that we'd like to revisit and are no longer available on our stages. But if you're close enough to Soulpepper, see Casey and Diana live, because it is well worth it.
And we'll pop information for that down below in this episode. But yes, digitally deep dive into the Canadian canon. It is there for you.
Bravo, Stratford, for doing this.
It is there for you. We are there for you. It's been a pleasure to talk about these pieces. And as always, to talk about art and share our thoughts and opinions. And we will continue to do so as we blast off into 2024. On that note, stay safe, stay warm, and we will see you on the next episode of The Cup. Cheers.
Cheers.